Are you a man looking for an intensive program to help you overcome sexually addictive behaviors? Gateway to Freedom is your answer. Gateway to Freedom is a 3-day workshop for men seeking to overcome any destructive sexual habits. Whether married, single, or divorced, Gateway to Freedom will help men regain hope for a new life of purity and real contentment. The workshop is conducted by experts in the field of sexual addiction recovery with decades of combined experience. Read testimonials of workshop alumni at gatewaymen.com. Get all the info and register online at gatewaymen.com or call 1-800-49-PURITY.
Hi, my name is Jonathan, and I'm the founder of the Gateway to Freedom Workshop. I want to personally invite you to be part of our next workshop coming up September 30th through October 2nd in Pennsylvania. So call us today at 1-800-497-8748 or visit gatewaymen.com.
Welcome to Pure Sex Radio, training men, educating women. Are you ready to get real and start living each day in purity? This dynamic program is designed to educate, encourage, and equip listeners with the tools necessary for living a life of sexual purity. Pure Sex Radio brings you the best in mobile talk radio. Listen to real-life struggles, learn how to overcome lust, pornography, and sex addiction, and get serious about purity. Your hosts for Pure Sex Radio are Jonathan Doherty and Stephen Cervantes. Jonathan is the director of Be Broken Ministries and founder of the Gateway to Freedom Workshop for Men. Stephen is the founder of the Hope Counseling Center. Visit us online at puresexradio.com. And now, please welcome Jonathan and Stephen on Pure Sex Radio.
Good day, radio listeners. Welcome to this edition of the Pure Sex Radio broadcast. We're glad to have you with us. My name is Jonathan, and I am here with Stephen. So, Stephen, how are you doing today?
You know, it's funny because I start smiling before you say that. You know, I feel like somebody special, about to be greeted and welcomed. So I'm doing well. Thank you. I'm smiling as usual.
Even after 530-something times that I've said it to you, you still like it, huh?
No, it's good. I feel like we're stars, even though it's you and I in a little corner room producing programs. I feel like, okay, the lights are on. Get ready. We're talking to our audience out there. And thank you so much for listening to us.
Yeah, thank you, listeners, for sure. And in fact, we're coming into the home stretch of the year. We're getting close to the last quarter of 2016, which is pretty amazing. And we just want to say a special thank you to those of you who have come alongside and financially partnered with us. That's been a tremendous blessing to us. It's also the way that we can keep these programs on the air. And so if you're new to the program and you're really you're getting a lot out of this and you're saying, man, I want these guys to continue doing what they're doing, not only on the radio broadcast, but in our ministry, because we seek to help men and women, families, to really just know what it is to walk in integrity and pass that along to the next generation. So if you'd like to come alongside us and partner with us, just go to puresexradio.com and visit the donate link. So, Stephen, we are going to dive into a great topic this week that I think is probably going to end up being 2 shows just because of just the depth of this topic. So why don't you share with our listeners what we're going to be going into?
Thank you. So, we work with a lot of men, and they talk. It's funny because people say, well, men don't talk, and, that's not our experience.
That's not true, yeah.
Well, the first time men get together at one of our retreat weekends, it's really quiet for the first hour or so, and then everybody realizes we're all the same, and the chatter starts, and everybody just has a good time. So we listen to a lot of guys, and I've been asking God, what do you want me to hear from all of this dialogue? Help me make sense out of the dialogue. Let me sort through the dialogues of what's told and what's repeated and what do we hear. And so we hear a lot about shame. right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we address that in our weekend. We hear a lot of faulty beliefs, about self, and so we address that in the weekend. And I've started to hear this new theme that comes out of the confusion of coming from a difficult home growing up. And the topic we're going to talk about is trust. Just that idea of trust, of trusting. So I would like, you and I just to have a few first thoughts at this.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say trust, what comes to mind, Jonathan?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is just a sense of vulnerability. Well, even before that, I immediately think of relationships. So I guess if I'm going to get really, really kind of high level and basic, the first thing I think of when you say trust is, well, that's relational. Now, right after I say that, my mind goes to, like a trust fund. But that's a totally different thing. But I think, obviously, in our context, the first thing I think of is, well, that's about relationships, right? Trust is about relationships. And,
trusting others.
And when I think about that, I think that's about how much you're willing to sort of give to another person of yourself. What am I willing to trust them with of me? Mm-hmm. So I think of trust in that way.
So in my mind, I'm starting to put together trust in a person's life and confusion in a person's life. So that if you can trust self, world, God, others, you have less confusion. But we got to go back and look, we never blame parents here. We never blame and shame. We honor our mother and father, but they were our trainers, and they were good or they weren't so good, and they were restful or they fought, and they worked too much or they were home training us. Whatever happened. But I'm thinking now that your initial level of trust comes from your childhood, growing up. Could you trust your parents? And it's sort of, trust is sort of a vague concept. And you have to associate with safety and with training and understanding. Because if you can trust, you're safe. Okay? But if you can't trust, then you go into survival.
But aren't you, and I don't want to throw a fly in the ointment here, but aren't you assuming, when you say if you can trust, you're safe, aren't you assuming that the person that you are trusting is trustworthy? Otherwise you might, because a kid they might just trust their parents and they're not leading them in a good way. So that, again, I see trust as just saying, hey, I'm giving myself to you, and here I'm trusting you, and then I repeatedly get burned by you, but I keep trusting you. Yeah,
but isn't that really what happens? Children that are abused want to go home. Mm-hmm. That's very true, what you just said. It's what we know. It doesn't matter how chaotic home is, right? I was reading this guy was talking about trauma, and why is it that abused women tend to find men that are abusive, and you sort of see that. And I'm not blaming women, but you see a little pattern here. Well, it's sort of what we know. If you were screamed at all your life and told you were worthless, what do you think you're comfortable with? What do you know? You know chaos. And so chaotic women growing up have a hard time with men that came from very peaceful homes and real slow and loving. It just doesn't feel right, So, and that's a big general statement, I know. But the point is, you start to bond with and develop with, and the whole idea with your parents. And you're saying, some are going to be healthier than others, right? Mm-hmm. But the kid is going to form a bond. And here's the important part is how healthy do I get to develop with you, Mom and Dad?
So what you're saying, I guess, in this idea of trust is just as kind of a broad idea of trust is whether the environment is healthy or the relationship is healthy or not, trust is still present there. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes, you have. That's all you got as a kid. You got to trust your folks. And then it could be for great development or just survival, right? You're going to develop a template.
So would you say then that we are almost pre-wired to trust?
I think so. As kids, I think we come in believing and hoping for the best.
So whether or not we attach to healthy or unhealthy things, it doesn't matter. We want to trust.
Yes. So, and here's the deal. Nobody made me an expert on trust, okay? Let's remember, audience, we're learning together. There's no trust expert on the radio at the moment.
Amen.
We're learning together. So I'm glad you're asking these questions, because it forces me to think about this also, as everybody else is out there having all these ideas of what's he trying to establish here. So here's what we're trying to get to is, can you trust yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Did your parents teach you how to think well and how to problem solve well? And were your parents able to say to you, well, that was pretty good, and you're halfway there, and now let's do this and this, and we'll get all the way there. And so half of you did good, and now you're going to do, that 3/4 of you is good. Okay, you're 90%, so that they're influencing me, and that they're helping me learn me. Because trust is, it's funny, because now as we talk about it, it's on several levels, right?
Oh, it's multi-layered, yeah.
Yes, it's a bond.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, my angle on this is, you have to trust your parents to be your trainers. And what level of trainer did you have?
So maybe we need to, for the sake of this program, and if this turns into a second one, maybe define sort of the lane that we're in regarding trust. So, because it is such a broad topic. So what I'm hearing you say is we're going down that lane that is about maybe what was poured into us from our parents to learn how to maybe build a sense of confidence along this channel of trust. Is that
yes, you're right on. You're close there, because remember where I'm coming from. I'm listening to a bunch of wounded men talking about, now these are guys that developed addictions, right, as a way of coping with life. Mm-hmm. But they're talking about their childhood, and in their childhood there is so much confusion and poor training of the child. Okay? And so a lot of these guys say, well, I don't know.
I get you now. So what you're saying is the link that you're seeing is this inability to be trained well in trust is creating a lot of is pushing them towards a lot of these coping mechanisms to where they're very confused within themselves. So in other words, they don't have a whole lot of, they don't take healthy risks. They don't know really how to be assertive and confident in a healthy way. And then so they therefore then don't know how to bond well with others, right?
Yes, that's it. But what's funny is I'm listening to me try and talk and explain this, and I haven't thought it all the way through, and I sound pretty lame. That's what I'm getting from this. That's what I love about these podcasts. It's just guys talking, trying to figure out things, okay? Yeah. And so we got students out there raising their hands saying, I know a piece. I got a piece of this. I get it. I want to contribute. So we love feedback.
Well, and speaking of that, yes, we would love to hear your feedback, and there is an avenue for you to be able to do that. There's two ways you can do that. You can send an email to mypoint, so mypoint@puresexradio.com, or you can just go to our Twitter feed @puresexradio and send us a message or make a comment on our Twitter feed to just give us some feedback, because we are learning together, and you're part of this classroom and dialogue and conversation. So please join the conversation.
I love that we have a new little byline where we learn together. Mm-hmm, that's fabulous. And it's funny because I often thought in life, there are people that know things that I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's like they're ahead of me. And the more you know, the more successful you can be at life. And isn't that the mission, is to embrace life and live well and be successful at life? And so I love the fact that we get to participate in a dialogue and share with others that we are discovering pieces of life, and you get to sort of figure out, how does it work in your system? Mm-hmm. Because where we're going is the whole idea of, can I trust myself, is really where I'm going with this, okay? Mm-hmm. And can I trust myself? Because what we're finding is these guys cannot trust themselves. And why can't you trust yourself? Why is there such confusion, such aloneness or loneliness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And such desperation that you have to go find a fantasy. You have to get away from yourself, and you have to make a fantasy that's organized and repetitive and comforting, and you run to your fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. It's one of the reasons why we see so many men that are they ignore or deny their issue, or they blame somebody else for their issue, and a lot of it is like they've almost structured their lives in such a way that they're living out of body.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, hey, I can't. I know I'm always going to make the dumb decision. I know I'm always going to do this, and so they'll play the victim role. Like, hey, I guess I live in this culture. This is the way I am. They'll blame somebody else. They might blame their parents. They might blame their wife. They might blame their circumstance. And so that only plays into all of that confusion that serves what you're talking about this person that just says, I totally can't trust myself. I know I'm going to,
Yes.
We've met so many men that, especially if they get to that level of addiction, that are convinced and almost okay with the fact that they are and will screw up their lives.
They're convinced.
They just kind of,
it's
become such the norm in how they've lived that it's kind of like, and that's what you're talking about. There's no sense of trust that it's like,
at a deep level, early on, right? Very deep in their being. They can be in their head saying, okay, I know what to do, but when they get quiet.
That's the scared little boy that goes, I can't trust me with me.
Yes, that's it. That's a perfect way to say it. I'm going to write that down, me with me. So that's what I'm trying to do, is pull that apart and figure out what happened and how does it work well and how does it not work, so we can review our lives. Now, I wanted to run this by you because this is really interesting. The Bible says the heart is wicked, right?
And deceitful.
Yeah. And then what's the other verse? It's what comes at you. I don't have it. I read it.
It's not what goes in a man that makes him unclean, but what comes out. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. What comes out. It's like, oh boy, there's bad stuff in there. And so you can see why preachers would say, just be spiritual, But this one idea, this one concept, can you trust yourself? Now, we got to put that in a spiritual context, because people would say, no, you can't. You're evil. You're wicked. You're bad. You can't trust yourself. And what do you say to that?
What I say to that is, you're for one thing, you're taking trust out of the context of what we're talking about here. I mean, if you put it in that spiritual context, it's certainly like, okay, obviously, we are called to trust the Lord. Our hope in terms of life and goodness and heaven, is in Him. But I think what you're talking about is for the person who wants to immediately say, no, you can't trust yourself. Well, listen, when I look at Jesus, I don't see a man who was confused about who he was. I don't see a man who was confused about his calling or his purpose. I don't see a man who was confused and unable to trust himself with himself.
Yes, and you're saying it perfect.
I mean, there was a wholeness to his being that he didn't walk around with a sense of wringing his hands and going, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know.
Well, what are we going to do with those verses? What do they mean then? Because you're right, but what do they mean? The heart's wicked. Don't trust your own heart, right? What are they telling us in those verses?
They're telling us that something is broken.
Okay.
And that...
Well, I'm thinking flesh likes pleasure. Watch out. The flesh likes pleasure. You can drink too much, eat too much. You can do whatever too much. Make it up. You can play dominoes too much. You can do anything too much. We love pleasure and we get addicted to pleasure. Be careful with that. Don't be pleasure junkies, right? Be disciplined people. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think. And I'm trying to separate this conversation, because some people go, no, you can't trust yourself. Of course you can't trust yourself. Trust God. Just trust God. Well, you know what? I go to bed with me every night. Mm-hmm. And if I can't trust me, but that's the dilemma with most of these guys that come in for a training weekend. They can't trust themselves. They were not trained. They were not given the privilege or the right. I don't know how to say this even. They weren't given the gift. That's it. The gift of learn yourself.
Can I give you, because as you're saying this, can I give an illustration?
Absolutely.
Just out of my own life? Because prior to my recovery, and just so the listeners know, I think I maybe have mentioned this before on the broadcast, but I'm actually an introvert. So I get recharged and refreshed in solitude and quiet and aloneness. But here's the thing. Prior to my recovery, solitude, aloneness was terribly distorted in my life because of what we're talking about here. If I was alone, I was scheming, I was deceiving, I was letting all of that wickedness in my heart have its way. And so for me, to be alone then was an unsafe place.
Because you couldn't trust yourself.
Because I couldn't trust myself.
That's it.
And so part of what recovery did was it sort of redeemed the sanctity and sacredness of solitude.
Oh, that's good.
And so now I can be alone with me without fear, without apprehension, without anxiety, without thinking, oh my goodness, my wicked, deceitful heart is going to take me over the edge. And it's not, and I want our listeners to hear that it's not something that I did by pulling myself up by my bootstraps. It is still very much a thing that God did in my life. So it is a spiritual thing. But it was also very much about emotional growth and being able to say, could I go on a journey that goes into these scary areas in my life where I felt like I can't trust me with me?
Yes.
And by going down that path and working with counselors and working with men in groups and just some other great mentors, I've been able to get to a place where aloneness does not scare me.
Wow, that is perfect.
And I think that's what you're talking about.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. You just summarized it. We can go home. Okay, bye, everybody. We're done. He wrapped it up. That's perfect, though. So that's it, in the alone. And so in a child's life, when he's developing, he either learns about himself or he's there to accommodate the parents and their chaos, right? And so we learn to act. It was funny because I was reading this a while back about Oriental families. This was a long time ago. And I was up in a library, and there were a lot of Oriental people. It was really quiet in there. And I got to talk to some people, and they were saying, do you understand if you were raised by Oriental parents, quiet is very important. Mm-hmm. And it is important for you to understand that your role to accommodate your parents is to be quiet. Mm. And that's sort of the theme of our family. We are quiet people. And I mean, I couldn't believe it. The room was full of everybody understood this rule. I didn't get it. but somehow they all knew this. And I just say that to say the parents either allow the children to be little people in development or they use them to accommodate themselves. Okay, you be what I need you to be. Okay?
Yeah.
And so, does that make sense? What I'm talking about there? Okay, so when I'm growing up and I'm trying to figure out about me and am I okay and what am I supposed to think and hey, I have some feelings and some wants and well, how is that handled growing up? Because if parents are distracted, if there's too much fighting and arguing, if they're workaholics and gone or drinking and gone, I don't get to develop. Mm-hmm. And so I stopped trusting that I'm worth knowing. I stopped trusting that I can figure it out. I stopped trusting that that other people will help me. I stopped trusting. And then I start creating something quietly inside myself that's a substitute for what's supposed to be there, which is exactly what you just said. I put something there in all the craziness, right? What are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking that I want to move this to a couple of action points, and I know that we have not wrapped this topic up because I know there's plenty more here that we can get into in another broadcast. But in terms of for where we've gone to this point, talking about a childhood and confusion and trust.
Yes. Okay.
What are some things to this point in our conversation that we might be able to give to our listeners that can say, okay, if you're totally resonating with this, if you're going, yeah, I'm the confused person out here that
doesn't trust myself.
I get that.
Yeah.
I don't trust me with me. So what do I do? Because don't just leave me hanging and wait a whole nother week before I can get some kind of instruction here.
How come we can't lead them on for a whole other week?
Yeah, this is not a good teaser to have.
Okay.
We need to give something.
Okay, so once I realized that trust is a part of healing, is learning to trust yourself, and did you hear what you said? I put myself on a growth mission, counseling other men, mentors, groups. We could just go down the list: books, articles, right? Other people. So, and even just repeating this, just asking yourself the question: do I trust myself? Am I okay with me? And how come I'm not okay with me? And to start journaling. What's going on? What scares me?
And that's where I was going to go on two fronts. I was going to talk about the journaling, because sometimes I know how, if you've got trust issues, and in the vein that we're talking about them here, in terms of I struggle with trusting me with me, then sometimes it can feel very threatening and a little overwhelming to immediately jump into a group or immediately go to see a counselor. I mean, so sometimes a small step can be just starting to do what Stephen was talking about, starting to just kind of write out those thoughts. Like, okay, what are the circumstances and situations where I feel most vulnerable with me? In other words, I feel like I can't trust me the most, and these situations are with these people. And then I really think make those an offering of prayer, because here's the thing I discovered in my own journey. When I would take all those broken places, all the places where I was so apprehensive and anxious and, could not trust me with me, and I would make those an offering of prayer, the affirmation that God would give me, in the sense that you're enough for me. I'm okay with you. Those affirmations gave me such a greater sense of confidence that, well, if he's okay with me, if he loves me, if he's willing to train and transform me and love me, then maybe I could, I don't know, take a healthy risk. Maybe I could try some things that are new. And that's what eventually kind of gave me the confidence to step into some groups, to begin to see a counselor. And so I think just take the small steps. Don't feel like you've got to make some massive, drastic, giant leaps when your whole life maybe has been shrouded in confusion and distrust.
Good. So I'm going to go down a list of 7 things, and then we can build on those. Number 1, go find a book on trust. Just go on a search. God leads you to useful stuff. And the way I read books is I look for a title, and then I open it up and I look at the table of contents. If I like the contents, then if those points are points of interest, I get the book. But if I go, I don't care about that, then I don't get the book. Right? So you could look for a book. And we invite you to to listen to the podcast next time, because we're going to talk about it more. Jonathan said, start journaling. I thought that's 3. Number 4 is just write this statement: I can't trust me. Wouldn't it be powerful to write that down and think about that? Why can't I trust me? How could I? What would it take to trust me? When did I stop trusting me? So number 5 is always be prayerful. Put it all in the context of prayer, saying, God, I don't trust me. Wrap this whole thing in prayer. So from beginning to end, make it a prayer. That's 5. Number 6, meditations. There's great meditations if you go on like YouTube and put Christian meditations and just listen to affirming things that quiet your mind.
And I would also just add to that, sometimes music in those regards can be really helpful as well.
And my last one is write down some God affirmations. God thinks I'm enough. God died for me. I'm chosen. My name is in the book. I'm a son of the King. I'm wrapped in I wear Jesus' sweatshirt. I'm wrapped in the blood,
Well, folks, that's where we are going to wrap it up this week. We do want to let you know that we are here to help you and walk alongside you. So if this has stirred something in you, if you go, I totally need some more help in this area, please reach out to us, and we would like to get you connected with some resources and environments that are going to really help you heal and grow. And until next time, we look forward to having you back here on the Pure Sex Radio broadcast.
Pure Sex Radio is paid for by Be Broken Ministries. Visit us online at puresexradio.com.